Hi, my name is Antonella and I have always been the spare child in the family, the second place in the small print under the bold title adorned with the name of my sister, Gabriella, who is 4 years older than me and who has occupied the center of the stage since the beginning of my life, as if my role was solely to stand somewhere in the wings, hold her coat and clap for her from the darkness of the auditorium when the spotlight was exclusively on her. From the day I was born, my parents did not even have to choose who to bet on. Everything was clear at once. Gabriella was their pride, their project, their shining hope, and I was a quiet shadow, existing somewhere nearby so as not to disturb the composition. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I only got the things she refused, sometimes with an indifferent sigh, sometimes with lazy disdain, but always as if the very idea of giving me something seemed like a magnanimous act to her. When I was 7 and she was 11, she was given a brand new iPhone, shiny, with a box that smelled of new plastic and gloss, and my parents watched with affection as she unwrapped it, as if they were giving me not just a gadget, but a pass to the future. And 6 months later, on my birthday, I received her old flip phone with a cracked screen and sticky buttons, with which even writing a text message was a feat, and Mom and Dad seriously believed that they had given me a huge gift, and they expected me to say thank you, smile broadly and be grateful for such attention. It was like that with everything. Clothes, accessories, books, even school supplies. Gabriella would go to the mall with her mother every fall and come back with a mountain of new things. Jeans, dresses, sweaters, shoes, all picked out according to the latest fashions, all sparkling with newness, and then a year later, when she decided that the style was no longer hers, it would all go into my closet, stretched, faded, and sometimes torn, as if I should be grateful for the opportunity to wear clothes that someone else had already grown bored of. In middle school, I wore the dresses that Gabriella had once worn at school parties, only now they sat awkwardly on me, reminding me that I was a duplicate of something that had once sparkled. Birthdays were a special kind of torture. Comparing them was like comparing ballet to a duck dance. Gabriella's parties were big affairs with a balloon arch at the entrance, catering, music, DJs, themed decorations, sometimes even a photo zone, as if she were a princess, and the whole house was transformed into a royal hall. My celebrations resembled gatherings in a cheap cafe, a couple of friends, pizza bought on sale, plastic cups, and a cake from the supermarket with a candied rose on white icing, which no one wanted to eat. The message was clear without words. Gabriella had a future, and I had improvised experience and auxiliary existence without much ambition and shine. When I was 14 and Gabriella left for college, my parents took her to an expensive private school 3 states away, hugged her as if they were sending her off to the front, wiped away their tears and hers, repeated how much they would miss me and how ready she was for a new big life. I thought then, what if now, when the house becomes quieter and her room is empty, they turn to me, notice me for real, pay attention to the fact that I am here, nearby, alive, needing the same words, the same warmth? But I was deeply mistaken. Nothing has changed. Moreover, it has become worse, as if with her departure my chance has disappeared. Even theoretically, Mom and Dad called her every day, sometimes even twice, and they had a ritual. They would sit at the kitchen table, put the phone on speakerphone, and start asking her about everything, about her new friends, about her teachers, about the lunches in the cafeteria, even about what yogurt she had for breakfast. These conversations would go on for hours, as if it were their way of touching the light that emanated from her. Every other weekend they would pack up, go to her visit, bring her pies, warm sweaters, money, and return with a baggage of stories about how wonderful everything was going for her, how the professors adored her, how she was almost a celebrity on campus. And the money, oh, it was something out of this world. She got everything from it. Money for clothes, money for books, money for parties, money for weekend trips, money for vacations, money for coffee with friends. I heard my mother, lying on the couch with the phone, saying, "Sure, honey, I'll wire you $500 right now." And she did it with such ease, as if it were a tip. Meanwhile, I wore her old sneakers with the soles peeling off and wrote in a notebook with her name written all over it. When I asked for something new, anything at all, be it clothes, school supplies, or at worst shoes without holes, I was lectured on the value of money and how important it is to be able to be grateful for what you have. On my 16th birthday, I realized that I could no longer wait for someone to decide that I deserved better. I got a job at the local supermarket, first just helping bag groceries, then moving on to stocking the shelves, and while it wasn't prestigious or fun, I felt like I was finally in control of something in my life. I saved up every penny I could, denying myself extra sleep, entertainment, even food, so I wouldn't spend a dime while other kids were at the mall, at parties, or around a bonfire on the beach. I was in the store among boxes and scanners, among lists and shift schedules, but I didn't care because now I had a goal: to go to college and prove that I could do it myself. 2 years later, Gabriella graduated and returned home, like a long-awaited queen entering an old castle after a victorious campaign, and oddly enough, this coincided with the time when I was finally finishing school and standing on the threshold of something that could, if not change my life, then at least become its beginning, a real independent one, earned through my own labor. For months, I worked on college applications, typed essays on an old, barely alive laptop, read every line of requirements, compared departments, studied reviews, looked through hundreds of pages of forms and official websites, doing everything alone, because my parents were too busy turning Gabriella's return into some kind of triumphal procession, full of tears of affection, pride, and endless conversations about her prospects. I applied to 8 colleges, each choice carefully considered, each application the result of much deliberation, and all this did not happen in the comfort of my office under the supervision of my parents, but in between shifts at the grocery store, during lunch breaks of 20 minutes, when I managed not only to grab a bite to eat, but also to get through the freezing online application forms. I even paid all the application fees myself, clutching every bill I earned in my hand, knowing exactly where the next dollar would go. And when the letters with the results started coming, I was stunned. I was accepted to 5 schools, and although I knew that I had done everything possible, part of me still did not believe that this was real, that the efforts had finally borne some fruit. The best option was a local state college, not the most prestigious, but with a good program and, most importantly, with an offer of a partial scholarship covering 70% of the cost of tuition. It wasn't everything, of course. The remaining 30% still meant thousands of dollars, but compared to the zero I'd started with, it felt like the beginning of a wonderful opportunity. I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would help me cover the rest. After all, they'd paid for Gabriella's 4 years of private schooling, including travel, housing, food, and the endless expenses of her comfort. Deciding that I deserved at least an attempt to be heard, I picked a moment at dinner when the whole family was gathered around the table, and even Gabriella, beaming with excitement about her new internship, was in the room, busy detailing how she'd been trusted to present to important clients. I waited until the conversation about her monumental accomplishments had briefly died down and said, "I have good news," trying to sound confident, clear, as if there wasn't a churning sensation inside me. I got accepted to state college and they offered me a partial scholarship. It covers 70% of the cost of tuition. I expected something. A smile, praise, maybe surprise, albeit restrained, but something that would show that I had been heard, that I had been noticed. The answer was disdain. My father snorted and shook his head, not even trying to hide the irony. "College? You don't need college, Antonella. You need to get a real job and start earning money." My mother laughed, a real throaty laugh, as if I had said something ridiculous. "Honey, you're not cut out for college. You're cut out for physical labor, not books. That's just the way you are." I froze. "What do you mean I'm not cut out for this?" "I got accepted. I was offered a scholarship. This isn't a dream. This isn't a fantasy. This is a reality I created with my own hands." But that was when Gabriella stepped in, and her words were the final blow. She giggled, tossing her hair back. "Oh please, you're too stupid for college. You don't have the brains to handle the coursework. You're going to flunk out anyway." Even her parents went quiet for a moment at that, but no one stopped her. It was too much. I'd grown accustomed to being ignored, to getting the scraps, to having my accomplishments not counted as real. But in that moment, everything was different. This wasn't the familiar invisibility anymore. This was a direct denial of my value, my efforts, my future. I fell silent. There was no point in arguing. I could see it in their faces, in their eyes, in their voices. They really believed it. They really thought I wasn't smart enough, wasn't capable enough, that I was something different, something lesser, not deserving of the same chances they'd once given Gabriella. I sat at the table for the rest of the meal, not saying another word. Gabriella went on about the internship, my parents listening adoringly, and I, transparent, existing nearby but not with them. That night, lying in the dark, listening to the sounds of the old house and my own heartbeat, I made what might have been the most important decision of my life. I was going to college, with or without their support, with or without money. I would find a way. I would take on extra shifts, apply for loans, work nights if I had to. But I would not let them decide for me who I was and what I was capable of. Again, from then on, I threw myself into work with renewed fury. I took on more shifts at the store, and on weekends I began cleaning offices downtown, scrubbing floors and tables, picking up trash, and wiping up the evidence of someone's haste. The work was hard, grueling, and unglamorous, But every dollar I put in an envelope marked college brought me closer to my goal. My parents acted as if nothing had happened. The return to their routine of adoring Gabriella was complete. She was now living with us, doing an internship, sleeping until lunch, throwing things around the house, complaining about being tired, and telling me how hard it was to be an adult. And I was working 60 hours a week, saving, counting every notebook, every textbook, every dollar. Even with the scholarship, I still needed about $8,000 for the first year for tuition, books, food, transportation. It seemed impossible, daunting, almost unbearable, but I knew I wouldn't give up. The summer passed in a fog of work and stress, as if through a dirty glass, behind which day followed night without transition, without rest, without hope, as if time itself had shrunk to an exhausting rhythm of work, study, work again. And each morning began with pain in the body and with a growing fear of not having time, not holding out, not coping. 2 weeks before classes started, when I was already barely standing on my feet, crossing out the last dates in my rather tattered notebook, where each number symbolized another small step towards college, my mother suddenly burst into my morning ritual, like a guest who came not with news, but with a sentence. I was having a quick breakfast in the kitchen before the morning shift, late, as always, for the bus, when she walked in her robe with that same fake sweet smile that made my stomach clench because I knew there was always something nasty hiding behind it. "Antonella, we need to talk," she said, sitting down across from me with a cup of coffee, as if rehearsing a family scene for some fictional TV show. "Gabriella needs more space," she continued, as if it were a matter of course. "She wants to turn your room into a walk-in closet. You know how many clothes she has from college?" I froze, almost dropping my fork. I couldn't believe my ears. "Mom, I'm starting college in 2 weeks," I said, trying not to raise my voice. "I was planning on living here and commuting to classes to save money on housing." My mother shrugged, leaning back as if I'd suggested something capricious and stupid. "Maybe this is a sign that college isn't for you," she said with a lazy grin. "You could get a full-time job. It would make more sense." I swallowed back my anger. "I'm not dropping out," I said. She threw up her hands. "Well, then you'll have to figure it out on your own. Gabriella needs this room, and frankly it would be better for everyone if you moved out. You work all the time anyway, you're hardly ever home." It was a blow, not a physical one, but far more devastating because there was no spontaneity to it, only cold calculation. Me being thrown out of my own home so that Gabriella would have room for her dresses and shoes. Me, who had worked for 3 years to somehow claw my way out of poverty, to prove that I was worth something, that I was capable deep down. I knew this moment was inevitable, but it still cut to the bone. I had no choice. This weekend would be perfect. A few days to find somewhere to survive college and salvage some of my dignity. I called my friend Maya on my lunch break. We had been friends since high school, and she was one of the few people who knew the truth about my home. Not the polished version, but the reality with its disdain, indifference, and eternal comparison. "I need to find a place ASAP. Do you know anyone with a spare room?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't hesitate. "Actually, yes, I share a tiny apartment with 2 other girls, Sarah and Kim. It's honestly lousy, but maybe we could squeeze in a 4th. It'll be cheaper for everyone. Come see it after work." The apartment was a dump in the worst part of town, with peeling walls, thin partitions through which you could hear your neighbors coughing, a leaky ceiling, and a stove that threatened to explode if you turned the knob too quickly. But there was a roof, there were walls, and there were people, caring, real people who were willing to take me in, even if it meant sharing a bedroom with 3 people. That weekend I packed all my belongings, a few clothes, a few books, some bed linen, into garbage bags and fruit boxes. My parents weren't home. They were visiting Gabriella at her internship, so I didn't even have to say goodbye. I left a note on the kitchen table briefly stating that I was moving out and Maya's address in case they needed to find me. They never called, not that night, not the next day, not the week after. Going to college while working 2 jobs and living in a dilapidated apartment was harder than I could have imagined in my wildest dreams. I was constantly on edge. Sleep became a luxury. I slept 4 hours a night, sometimes less. I worked at the grocery store in the morning, went to classes during the day, cleaned offices in the evening, and studied at night, face down in my textbook. Maya, Sarah, and Kim became my salvation. Quiet, reliable, human. Maya was studying education and working part-time at a daycare. Sarah was in nursing school, and Kim was studying business. We all knew what it was like to live on the edge, what it was like to count change at the store, split a bag of noodles between 3 people, and rejoice at a discount on oatmeal when I didn't have money for food. They shared what they had. When I fell asleep at the table with an open notebook, they would quietly cover me with a blanket, turn off the lights, and not wake me. But even with their kindness and support, it was barely possible to survive. I lived mostly on instant noodles and free leftovers from campus events. My clothes were literally falling apart. Seams were torn, buttons were missing, and the fabric was becoming transparent from wear. I walked to school because I couldn't afford to fill my car with gas. And gas had become synonymous with luxury for me. I bought the textbooks secondhand, and some pages I simply copied from the library if I couldn't afford the whole book. And then, almost a year into my studies, when I thought I had learned to hide my fatigue and pain with a smile, there was an encounter that knocked me off my feet more than any blow. I was walking through the city center after my shift, tired, in a sweaty uniform with bleach stains on my jeans, with a trash cart that I had left at the entrance to a diner, when I literally ran into them, Mom, Dad, and Gabriella. They were leaving an expensive restaurant, dressed up, shining, laughing like the perfect picture from an ad for family happiness. Their faces froze when they saw me. It wasn't just shock. It was rejection, disgust mixed with awkwardness. I saw myself through their eyes. Thin, haggard, in cheap clothes and dirty sneakers with dark circles under my eyes. "Oh my God," Gabriella said, looking at me as if I were not her sister but some random passerby whom she had noticed in the crowd only because of my excessive slovenliness. "You look terrible." I clenched my teeth and forced out a cold "thank you," trying to walk past them without holding my breath or letting a single emotion escape, but she didn't stop. "No, seriously," she continued, bursting into laughter, as if this were a comedy in which she was playing the role of a wit. "You look like a homeless person." Before I could say anything, my father looked me over with a look of disgust, as if he was trying to determine whether I had brought an infection with me. "This is what happens when you make the wrong choice, Antonella," he said with the icy certainty of a man who is always right. My mother shook her head, sighing so dramatically that a passerby standing by a flower stall involuntarily turned around. "You look like a beggar," she said, as if she were talking not about me but about someone else's accidental fate. "This is embarrassing." Gabriella was still giggling, her laughter piercing the air like the sound of glass breaking on tile. "If I had any extra money, I would definitely give it to you," she said, raising her eyebrows mockingly. "It looks like you need it." And those words hit me in the gut, fast, precise, and irrevocable. My own sister was talking to me as if I was standing on a street corner begging for money. Humiliation and anger were all at once so tangled together that I could barely keep from screaming right there in front of everyone. They walked away, still laughing, throwing comments over their shoulders about how pathetic I looked, how hard I had fallen, how uncomfortable my appearance alone made them. I stood on the sidewalk, my fists clenched until my knuckles were white, shaking with rage and humiliation, watching their retreating backs and the reflection in the shop window, the one who looked truly exhausted, dusty, who had forgotten what it was like to feel beautiful. People passed by, some casting sympathetic glances, some simply looking surprised, and some probably wondering why I was crying in the middle of the street in the middle of the day. But I didn't care. That night, back in my creaking apartment, I made a vow to myself I would succeed, I would graduate, find a good job, get back on my feet, and they, every single one of them, would see who the real losers were. I redoubled my efforts, pouring everything I had left into every assignment, every project, every lecture. I studied so furiously that I covered the pages of my textbooks to the brim with writing, worked more hours than I could handle, took on extra shifts, worked wherever I could, and even volunteered for student projects to get extra credit and prove myself to my professors. My grades had been good before, but now they were perfect. I made friends with professors, participated in academic discussions, asked questions, sought answers, and didn't let myself fall for even a second. 3 years flew by like a whirlwind, taking with them sleepless nights, frayed nerves, and feelings that were heightened to the limit. I kept my head down, didn't make a scene, didn't seek pity. I just worked, and somehow, against all odds, I graduated with honors on graduation day. I walked across the stage with my head held high, wearing the gown Sarah had lent me, Maya's shoes, and a soul full of everything I couldn't put into words. My family wasn't in the audience. Instead, Maya's parents sat in the front row, supporting me more than any family member had ever supported me in my entire life. And frankly, it was even better that they were the ones who saw my moment of triumph, because they knew what was behind it. My professors noticed my work ethic, my focus, my effort, especially Dr. Martinez, my mentor in my marketing class, who once told me, "You are exactly what every company needs: hardworking, reliable, and smart. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Thanks to her, I got interviews at several companies before the end of my last semester. I chose a marketing position at a mid-sized company in the city center. The salary was higher than I could have imagined, and it included health insurance, paid vacation, and benefits. All the things that seemed unattainable. After years of living on noodles and vending machine coffee, I could finally breathe. I moved out of my crappy apartment and into a small but clean studio apartment with real walls, a kitchen with a working stove, and a bed. Not an air mattress, but a real bed with a mattress I chose myself. I could afford groceries without counting coins, and I even started saving money. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was living, not just surviving. My job became my second home. I delved into everything from digital campaigns to market analysis, took on additional tasks, stayed late, came up with unconventional moves, and my boss Barbara noticed. After a year, I was promoted to senior marketing specialist and offered a serious raise. The money was coming in steadily, and remembering what it was like to lose everything, I began saving almost half of my salary. I set a goal for myself to buy a house, a real house, one that would make no one doubt that I had achieved my goal. Out of my entire family, only my Aunt Raymonda kept in touch with me at all. She called every few months, not too intrusively, just to see how I was doing, and sometimes between the lines shared news about others. I never asked about my parents or Gabriella, but Raymonda told me anyway. One night, as I lay on the couch after a long day, eating grapes, she said, "Your sister got married last year. Some guy she met at her internship. They had a big wedding at a country club. She's great." I responded automatically, although I didn't really mean it. Raymonda continued, "They live with your parents now. Gabriella's husband lost his job, so there's not enough money. She complains about it at every family gathering." I remained silent, no comment. Part of me wanted to ask questions, to know more, maybe even enjoy the irony a little, but I reminded myself, their problems are not my problems anymore. Raymonda continued, "She had a baby last year too, a little girl, and she's pregnant." Again, her voice was calm, almost detached, as if she were reporting something mundane. But beneath the words there was an inner weariness, either from the volume of news or from the nature of the news itself, which reflected a greater drama than could be conveyed by a simple retelling. "2 kids and lives with her parents," she added, as if to sum it up, as if this were the natural progression that Gabriella, in her opinion, had always sought to avoid. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for my sister, not because I was inclined to sympathize with her, but because when life shortens your path to repeating the same patterns you supposedly ran from, it's always a little tragic. But then I remembered the way she looked at me on that street, the way she laughed as I stood there in my threadbare clothes, after 2 shifts and 1 bowl of noodles in 24 hours, and the feeling instantly evaporated. "What are they saying about me?" I asked, not really sure why I was doing it, because I knew it wouldn't be good. And yet some part of me, maybe out of masochism, maybe out of a desire to confirm my loneliness, wanted to know. Raymonda paused. "They tell people you live in the slums," she said ruefully. "Your mother always says you look terrible when people ask her that, and Gabriella likes to tell you that your life probably went downhill after college." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because in that moment I felt how far I had already come from their world. "Do they know I graduated?" I asked, knowing the answer perfectly well. "I don't think so. They've never asked about you directly." Work continued to go uphill. I got another promotion, this time to marketing manager. It wasn't just another job change, it was recognition. It was a significant promotion, and I was finally making the kind of money I dreamed of when I was sitting at the small kitchen table in that wild apartment, washing down my noodles with tap water. I started looking at houses in earnest, spending evenings and weekends studying neighborhoods, monitoring listings, calculating what I could afford and where it would be not just a place to live, but a space that would say for me. I did it. I wanted something not grandiose or flashy, but something that would make it clear when you looked at it that a person who had not just survived, but one lived there. When I turned 29, I celebrated modestly but with pleasure, at a nice restaurant with Maya and a few colleagues from work. It was the first night I could afford to order what I wanted without looking at the price and not feel guilty about it. A week later I found the perfect house, neat, modern, with a spacious layout, a bright kitchen, a cozy living room, and a backyard where I could read in the evenings covered with a blanket. The realtor quickly realized that I had come not just to look, but to buy, and we completed the paperwork almost without a hitch. On the day of signing the papers, I felt like I was floating above the ground. I had a home, a real one, mine. I spent the next few weeks decorating it. I slowly, deliberately selected furniture, textiles, decor elements. For the first time in my life, I had not what was cheaper or what was left over from someone else, but exactly what I wanted. Everything was new, everything was mine. Not a single fragment of someone else's life, not a single crack of someone else's disappointment. I even called Raymonda to share the news, unable to keep it to myself any longer. "You bought a house," she repeated, with stunned delight. "That's wonderful, Antonella. I'm so proud of you." Thank you, I said, smiling. I'm planning a housewarming party next month. I'd love it if you could come. Of course I'll be there. It's amazing news, she said, and I knew she meant it. I should have known that Raymonda wouldn't be able to keep it a secret. Maybe deep down I didn't want her to. Maybe I really did want them to know, wanted it to sink in. 2 weeks later, as I was unpacking the last of the boxes, the smell of fresh paint still lingering in the air, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I didn't even go to answer it right away, thinking it might be the neighbors. But when I turned the handle and opened the door, there they were, my parents and Gabriella. I froze. They looked older, tired. They all had those tired eyes of people who hadn't slept peacefully for a long time. Gabriella's belly was rounded. She was obviously pregnant again. And her face was not as well groomed as before, but grayish and nervous. "Hello, Antonella," my mother said, as if we had just talked yesterday, as if there had been no exile, no tears, no years of erasing them from my heart. I didn't invite them in, but they walked past me, as if this was not my home, but theirs, as if everything they had touched in the past still belonged to them. I watched them look around. Their gazes slid over the furniture, the decoration, the interior items, and I saw Gabriella's lips tighten with something like envy. "How did you let yourself do all this?" she asked, clearly surprised. "I'm working," I said simply. Dad nodded. "This is a really nice place," he said, as if he hadn't expected me to do something like that. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "We heard you bought a house," Mom said. "We wanted to see it." "I didn't invite you," I said, but they just laughed as if I'd told a ridiculous joke. "We're family," Dad said. "We don't need invitations." I was about to say that this was one of those times when invitations were necessary, that they had stopped being a family the moment they kicked me out for the walk-in closet, but Mom looked back and said something that made my heart stop for a moment. "It's a beautiful house, Antonella," she said slowly, looking around. "But it doesn't suit you very well, does it?" "It's more Gabriella-ish." I turned to her, frozen, looking into the eyes of this woman who had once held me in her arms. "What do you mean? It doesn't suit me very well?" I asked, feeling a wave rising behind the calm. My mother continued to walk around my living room as if she were inspecting a property for possible purchase, assessing the decoration, the furniture, the lighting, as if she owned the house, or at least had the right to judge whether it was worthy of being in a family. "Well, it's just very beautiful," she said, pretending to be kind, as if she approved of her daughter's choice, not remembering how she had once told friends with the same expression that they said I lived in a slum. "And Gabriella really needs a place like that," she added after a pause, trying to sound as casual as possible, as if begging me wasn't about her, it was about justice. "She has 2 children and another one is on the way, so maybe you should give her the house." I laughed, loudly, ringingly, almost with relief. This laughter escaped me not because I was having fun, but because I could not think of any other way to react to this blatant madness. "Are you crazy?" I breathed out, but something dangerous was already beginning to pulse in my chest, like a storm before a thunderstorm. "Think about it." My father intervened, sitting down without an invitation on my new sofa, the one I had chosen after months of searching, bought with money I earned by not sleeping, not eating, neglecting myself. "You got this house easily, and Gabriella is married, she has children. She needs him more than you do." Easy, the word flashed before me like a neon sign over an abyss. I couldn't believe my ears. Easy? I worked like crazy, working 2 jobs, combining studies and physical labor, living in an environment that would be flattering to call poverty. I saved every penny. I missed weekends, birthdays, vacations. I collected my life piece by piece, like a broken mirror. And they said it was easy. Gabriella, meanwhile, walked around the house, examining every corner with envy that she no longer tried to hide. "It's not fair that you live in such a nice place, and I'm stuck in a tiny room with Mom and Dad," she said, pursing her lips. "Then maybe you and your husband should rent a separate place," I answered coldly. "We can't afford it," she whined. "Mark's been bouncing around from job to job, and the kids?" "Not my problem," I snapped. My mother came closer to me, a strained softness creeping into her voice. "This is your chance to come back to the family, Antonella. You could prove you care by doing one thing for Gabriella." I looked at the 3 of them, the ones who had once called themselves my family but had kicked me out of the house for an extra closet, the sister who had laughed at me, calling me a beggar, the parents who sat on my couch and acted as if they still had the right to decide who owned what. They were standing in my house, the house I'd paid for with my sweat, demanding that I give it up. I felt my insides tighten, not with pain, but with a cold fury I couldn't and wouldn't hold back any longer. "I need to make a call," I said, and the three of them looked at each other, their faces lit up with triumph as if they really thought I was going to give in. Then we can continue this conversation, I added, and without waiting for an answer, I disappeared into the bedroom. I took out my phone, dialed 911 with trembling fingers and put the receiver to my ear. 911, how can I help you? A female voice answered. I need the police, I said as quietly as I could. There are people here demanding that I give them my property. Are they threatening you, ma'am? They won't leave when I ask them to, and they demand that I give them my house. We'll send someone right away. The operator assured me. I hung up, took a deep breath, straightened up and walked back into the living room. Gabriella was already making plans out loud as if the move was a done deal. The master bedroom will be perfect for Mark and me, she was saying. Each kid will finally have their own room. The backyard is great for the kids too, Mom added, looking out the window with a dreamy smile. I'm glad you like it, I said calmly, coming closer. Dad nodded, even smiling slightly. So you'll do it? You'll sign the house over to Gabriella. I shrugged. We'll wait and see. 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and there stood 2 police officers, a man and a woman in uniform, serious, wary. Ma'am, we got a call about a property dispute, one of them said. Yes, thank you for coming so quickly, I said, stepping back. These people came to my house and demanded that I give it to them. They call themselves my family, but I don't know them. My parents turned pale. Dad jumped up from the couch, his face flushed. We are her parents, he shouted. She is our daughter. And I am her sister, Gabriella added, clenching her fists. I looked at the officers calmly, without hysteria, but with such firmness that none of them dared to doubt my words. I have never seen these people in my life. They came to me, declared that they deserve my house, and they are not going to leave, Mom babbled. Antonella, what are you doing? We are your family. Officers, I interrupted her. Could you please escort these strangers off my property? The police looked at each other, their eyes darting between us, trying to figure out what was going on here. Clearly not the most routine situation even for them. Finally, one of them spoke. Regardless of your relationship, ma'am, if you ask them to leave your property and they refuse, we are obligated to ask them to leave. This is insane, Gabriella screamed, her voice shrill in the silence, shattering the fragile order of my home like a stranger screaming in a temple. She is being completely unreasonable, she added, taking a step forward as if to prove her right to be heard. But the officer standing at the front door did not flinch, remained as hard as granite, unaffected by tears, familiarity, or status. You need to leave now, he said with the unwavering certainty that always comes when justice requires no explanation. My parents and Gabriella had no choice but to head for the exit, and in that moment, as their footsteps echoed across the laminate flooring of my hallway and their expression seemed to be frozen in my memory forever, I still felt a buzz of indignation, surprise, and something else that just wouldn't defy definition. As they left, my mother turned around, her lips pressed tightly together, her voice almost snake-like. You've completely cut yourself off from your family, she said, throwing the accusation around as if it were meant to pierce me. I hope you're happy. I didn't answer. I just watched them walk to their car, hearing Gabriella still muttering under her breath about unfairness, about being passed over, about deserving better. But when they left, when the dust from the tires settled and the air in the house cleared of the presence of people whose shadows had oppressed my walls for too long, I felt something completely unexpected: relief. Complete, deep, liberating relief. That filled me completely, displacing everything else. I stood in my living room, looking around the space that had become my fortress, my refuge, the fruit of hard work and silent resistance. This was my house, my furniture, my life, which I had built brick by brick, starting from the rubble. For the first time in many years, I truly felt free, as if I had not simply thrown off a heavy burden, but burned an entire bridge leading back to a past from which I no longer intended to return. 2 weeks later, Raymonda called me. I recognized her voice immediately, warm, ironic, a little tired but always real. Your parents are telling everyone that you've gone crazy, she said, as if she were reading the latest gossip from the local newspaper. They say that you're greedy and unstable. What do you think? I asked, although I knew that Raymonda always had the right answer. She laughed, and the laugh sounded like applause. I think you finally stood up for yourself. Good for you, by the way. Will you still come to my housewarming? I wouldn't miss it for anything, I answered with a smile. The party was exactly how I had always imagined my first real meeting with like-minded people. Maya came with her boyfriend. Friends from work brought snacks, laughter, lightness, and easy conversations. Raymonda handed me a bottle of expensive wine and kissed me on the cheek. As if I really deserved a celebration, we ate delicious food, drank good drinks, listened to music and laughed until we cried. To Antonella, Maya said, raising her glass. For proving that perseverance and determination can overcome everything. Everyone joined in the toast, and in that moment I felt that I was surrounded by people who were not just there for me, but truly cared about me, without conditions, without demands, without hidden expectations. These were the ones who stayed when others left, those who rejoiced at my successes not with envy, but with sincere delight. As the evening wore on and the guests began to leave, I walked through the house, turning off the lights in each room, feeling pride swell with each flick of the switch, pride that I hadn't given up, that I had persevered, that I had built this house as a symbol of the fact that I had survived everything they had tried to throw at me and had come out stronger. This wasn't just a place to live. It was a testament to the fact that I had chosen myself. As I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw my parents' number. I almost ignored the call, but curiosity got the better of me. "What?" I said dryly. "Antonella, please." I heard my mother's voice, no longer accusing but pleading, trembling, unfamiliar. "Can't we work this out? Family sticks together." "You're right," I replied. "Family sticks together. I wish I had a family." I hung up and blocked the number without a second's hesitation. Then Gabriella's, that was it. The next morning I woke up in my bed in my house, surrounded by my things. The ones I had chosen and bought, earned not by asking but by my own labor. I made coffee in the clean kitchen, went out into the backyard and, looking at the flower bed, began to think about what I would like to plant in it. And then in that silence under the morning sun, for the first time in my life I felt real peace. I realized something important. You don't choose the family you are born into, but you have the right to choose the one you stay with, and sometimes the best choice is to leave and build something of your own, something new, better, real. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and put a like. See you soon.